All right, we are in Matthew chapter 9, for those of you who have forgotten everything. We're in Matthew chapter 9 at verse 9. So let me just kind of remind you where we are, in particular, because we're making a little turn today. We had the first three miracles, if you remember, the healing of the leper, the healing of the Gentile, the healing of Peter's mother-in-law. And then, if you remember, we took a little sidetrack as Jesus was on the edge of the lake, getting ready to leave, and he taught the lessons on the cost of discipleship. What does it really cost to be a disciple? As those people were trying to decide whether to follow him in a boat or whether to stay on in Capernaum. And then we had three more miracles that we've talked about. One was the boat and the waves and the sea, the kind of natural forces that Jesus was in control of. Then we saw him with the supernatural forces, with the casting out of the demon. And then finally, the last one was his authority over sin. So now again, after these three, we take a little side trip because again, he has a question that he wants to answer. As he heals this man of his sin, the very logical question that comes up is, okay, so if he can heal sin, if he can forgive sin, whose sin can be forgiven? What's the criteria for your sin being forgiven? Who does he not forgive? Who does he forgive? What's necessary to experience this forgiveness? And just to give you kind of the real summary statement of that, if you look down quickly at verse 13, chapter 9, verse 13, the very end of that verse says, "For I did not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance." That's really the summary of everything we're going to be talking about this morning, that his call is not for the righteous, but for sinners. And this is not a new message. We see this message over and over. Let me just show you a couple things to remind you. In Luke chapter 5, you can turn or not. You just listen, whatever you want. Just these two verses. In Luke chapter 5, verse 8, it says, "When Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, 'Depart from me, for I am a sinful man.'" Right? Peter recognizing that he is a sinner, and it's only a sinner that can get this forgiveness. And then we see a similar thing in 1 Timothy chapter 1, where Paul makes a similar statement. 1 Timothy chapter 1, verse 15 says, "This is a faithful saying and worthy of all acceptance, that Christ came into the world to save sinners, of whom I am chief," right? His own recognition that he's a sinner. That's why Jesus came into the world to save sinners. So again, that's what this is all about. Jesus is answering the question, who is it that can be forgiven? Who is it that can be saved? And the answer to that is sinners. And what we'll see here, we're going to look through verses 9 through 17. He gives two different examples. One is a positive example with Matthew, being forgiven. And then we'll see the Pharisees being discussed as those who will not be forgiven because of their self-righteousness. Anyway, so that's the summary of what we're going to talk about today. You can take that to the bank and we'll go on to the details. So verse 9. Mine says, "As Jesus passed on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax office, and he said to him, 'Follow me.' And so he arose and followed him." So first, I just want to say again, we see this little verse in here. Remember that this book is written by Matthew. So this is Matthew's own salvation experience, if you will, when he, followed Christ from this point on. So there's not a lot of details. He's not, speaking a lot about himself. But again, I want to remind you the reason that this is in here is to answer the question, who can be forgiven? Not just to share a story about Matthew's salvation experience, but he's answering the question, who can be forgiven? I do want to, let's see. Yeah. So in both Luke and Mark, well, let's just turn to Mark a minute. Go to Mark chapter 2. Let me just show you a couple things that are in there. Mark chapter 2, we'll see in verse 13. Yeah, Mark chapter 2, verse 13. So Mark tells the story. In verse 13, it says, and he went out again by the sea, and all the multitude came to him, and he taught them. So here again, Matthew again is in Capernaum. He goes for a walk down by the sea, down by the lake, and a crowd gathers around him, and he teaches them. Right. So he's at this position becomes important in a few minutes. So Matthew shares that additional detail, and then look at verse 14. It says, as he passed by, he saw Levi, the son of Alphaeus, sitting in the tax office, and he said to him, follow me. So he arose and followed him. So in Mark and Luke, this man is called Levi. In Matthew, he's called Matthew. Now it's you know that people have multiple names in Scripture. All the commentaries agree this is the same person. This is Matthew, who is also called Levi. Matthew very likely being the name that Jesus gave him. It means the gift of God, where Levi is probably his kind of historical name, his Jewish name, if you will. In mentioning that he is the son of Alphaeus here in Mark, that may indicate that he is a brother of some of the other disciples. That would be the James the Lesser, Thaddeus, Simon, are all called in different places sons of Alphaeus. So it's interesting that we have this tax collector, this publican, and we'll talk a lot more about that. But he has brothers, perhaps, that are other disciples that are part of this group. All right. So it says back in Matthew now, it says that he saw him at the tax office. Do y'all have a different translation of where he was sitting? Mine says tax office. What does yours say? Anything else?
Toll booth.
Toll booth.
Tax collector's booth.
Tax collector booth. Yeah. Toll booth actually, although it sounds funny, may be the best translation of what we're talking about here. And I'll come back to that in a second. But so this is, Matthew is a tax collector. He is a publican, as it's talked about again in the other Gospels. So this is typically a Jew who served Rome. This is a Jew who essentially was a traitor. The other Jews certainly thought of him as a traitor. He kind of bought a franchise, if you will, into the Roman system in order to collect taxes for them. They had a deal where, he would get support and backup from the Roman soldiers to make sure he could collect the taxes. And oh, by the way, if he collected anything more than what Rome wanted, he could keep it. And so a lot of these, were terrible people who would, double, triple the taxes and made out very well because of it, because they had they typically had a Roman soldier nearby, and if people didn't give the taxes, they were immediately turned over to Rome. Now, so the Jews hated these people. These publicans, they were thought of as the worst part of society, associated with dogs and everything else. They were thought of as being anti-religious because only God can get gifts, and yet we're having to give gifts to Rome. So, from a religious perspective, they were not allowed in the synagogue, because they were thought of as just the worst. And then, by the way, there's two different kinds of tax collectors in Scripture. One of them were the tax collectors who collected like income tax and property tax, poll tax, those kinds of things. They generally sat in a tax office, and people would come to them and bring their taxes. And then there was a second kind that was kind of a duty tax, a tax on services, purchases, on how many animals you had, how many wheels on your cart, and another part of it was tolls. It's very likely, because of the word that's used to describe Matthew here, that he's that second kind of tax collector. And by the way, they were thought of even less than the first kind of tax collector, because again, they would just decide, you have 10 toes, and so we're going to tax every toe today. You're wearing 2 pieces of garments, so therefore we can have 2 times the tax today. So we mentioned, as we went and looked at Mark, that he's here by the seashore. It's very likely that this is a toll booth, as Curtis has said, where he is collecting taxes from everybody who's going in and out on the sea. So if you're getting in a boat and you've got 5 people, you're going to pay a tax. You're going to have to get his stamp and signature on something that says it's okay for you to get in your boat and go across the river. If you come back with 15 fish, there's going to be a tax on every one of those fish. So these guys, they were the worst of the worst. They were absolutely hated by society, and particularly by the general population, as would be confronting them here. And you can, I also want to bring back up, right, that he had brothers that were disciples. It's very likely that he was an outcast in his family. They would probably not speak to him. They would think of him as that lost brother, that went on to work with the Romans. It's a pretty bad situation from a relationship thing that he's in, but a really good situation from a monetary perspective. He's getting a lot of money, he's living a high on the hog, etc. All right, so now let's look at Jesus' response to him again in it's very short, going back to Matthew chapter 9. Verse 9, Jesus passed from there. He saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax office, or tax booth, or toll booth, or customs house, depending on your translation. And he said to him, "Follow me." And so he arose and followed him. It's an amazingly short little statement, right? All Jesus says to him is, "Follow me." Now, what is going through Matthew's mind when Jesus comes to him and says, "Follow me"? What does he know?
Do we really know what he knows at this point?
I'm asking you what you think he knows, CT.
So it's because he followed him, I would think he knows something. I mean, he's obviously probably seen some stuff. Some of the miracles.
He's seen some stuff, right? Jesus has done some stuff.
He had to have heard his teachings at some point, you would think.
Yeah, I mean, I just, thinking logically, this is a guy who's sitting there in the toll booth. People are going in and out all the time. He is from the area, right? He's got brothers in the area. He's got brothers who are disciples. He knows about Jesus. He knows who he is. He's heard the stories. This is not a person he's never heard of before who just steps up to him. And you also got to think, this is a person who knows he is a sinner, right? He knows he is looked upon as the worst in society. He knows he's looked upon as a dog. He knows his brothers hate him. And so when Jesus comes up to him and says, "Follow me," this has got to be like, nobody talks to me. My brothers don't even talk to me, right? And you're going to come up and say, "Follow me," which is implicitly saying your sins are forgiven, right? So when he says, "Follow me," he's saying, your sins are behind you. Let's not talk about your sins. Let's talk about going forward. Let's talk about following me. It's got to be this has got to be a man that's under conviction already as he hears about Jesus. There's no doubt he heard the story about the paralytic, right? And that his sins were forgiven. And so he's got to be thinking there, man, this might be somebody who can actually deal with my sins. In in Luke, when the only additional piece of information we have in Luke, it says that he arose, followed Jesus, and he forsook all. Right, he left everything behind. So on one sense, you say, well, what did he leave behind? He was, despised and everything else. Well, he left behind a considerable fortune, probably, right? He left behind the relationship that he had with the Romans. He had left behind this really good job. He lost everything. And by the way, there's no going back, right? Once you kick the Romans in the teeth, there's no going back to them saying, oh, I messed up. I'd like to be a tax collector again. He got rid of it all. So that's the story. But the big message, the important message that we get out of this is Jesus can even forgive a tax collector, right? Because again, we're answering the question, who can Jesus forgive? He can forgive a sinner, and even the worst of sinners. This is the worst of the sinners, this guy right here, and Jesus can forgive him. That's the big message that is being told by Matthew putting this story in here. He can even forgive me, me who was a tax collector, me who was a dog, me who was looked down by everybody. Okay, got that one? All right, let's keep going. Verse 10. Now it happened as Jesus sat at the table in the house that behold, many tax collectors and sinners came and sat down with him and his disciples. Now, whose house are we in now?
Matthew's house.
Yeah, we're in Matthew's house, right? We're not in Peter's house. Now, if you go to Luke, let's look at the story there because, again, he gives more details. If you go to Luke chapter 5, so Luke chapter 5, around verse 27, 28, we see again the call to Levi. In verse 28, he left all, rose up, and followed him. And then look at verse 29. It says, then Levi gave him a great feast in his own house, and there were a great number of tax collectors and others who sat down with them. Right, so here we have Levi, Matthew, his response. He decides to follow Jesus, and the first thing he does is he has a party. He invites all of his friends. By the way, who are all of his friends?
Tax collectors.
Right? Tax collectors and sinners, right? I mean, those are the only people that he knows, is all the rest of the tax collectors. Probably a couple of Romans, even got invited, right, to this party. He only knew the worst of society, and they're all invited to this feast, to this party that he has to have. Now, why does he do this? Duh. Why does he do this?
Why does Matthew do it, or why does
Yeah.
Jesus do it?
Why does Matthew do it?
Wants to bring his friends with him. Let them know the message too.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it, right? He recognized that something amazing had happened to him, that he had been forgiven of this sin that he knew was a sin, and he wanted to make sure the rest of his people knew it. All of his friends, all of his acquaintances, the rest of his family, right? He wanted to make sure that they could meet this Jesus and they could find out for themselves what this was all about. So, there's no question that his first thought was, I need to tell others. I need to tell some other people about Jesus and what he's done for me. It's convicting for us, is it not? that his primary response was, let's make sure everybody else knows about Jesus. All right, let's keep going. Verse 11 says, now when the Pharisees saw it, they said to his disciples, why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? So again, what's funny here is it's not the tax collectors and sinners who are griping, right? They're not saying, why did you invite us? We have to hear this Jesus guy. We certainly don't want to be in church. Now we're going to have to watch our language. I mean, you know, he was not concerned about the response of the sinners. Right, and the sinners did not respond in that way. And see, this is my point in bringing this up is that this is our excuses. One of the excuses in the back of our head. Well, if I tell somebody who is a sinner about Jesus, they're going to get all upset and they're going to get angry and they're going to get mad. That didn't happen. There's no sense here that the tax collectors and sinners didn't just love this feast and didn't just love meeting Jesus. The people who are griping are the religious people. Was there a comment? Okay, keep going. So the people that are complaining, right, are the Pharisees. They're saying, you know, what's going on here? Why is he eating with it? You know, I got to also think, you know, the Pharisees have just seen the paralytic be healed and seen Jesus forgive him of his sins. So there may be some of them going, you know, maybe this guy really is something. Maybe this guy really is important. Why is he not having a party for us? Well, you know, why is he not having a party with us Pharisees? That if he's somebody, if this is God or some messenger of God, certainly he would have a party with the Pharisees, not with a bunch of sinners, right? So all this stuff I think is going through their heads, you know, and so their response is, why are you eating with a bunch of sinners? Why are you sitting with them? Why not sit with us? It's just a fascinating response. Now, by the way, this is not a real question. He's not really asking them this. He's accusing them, right? This is an accusation. You are eating with sinners. You are eating with tax collectors. That is obviously wrong according to our rules, the rules that we made up to say, you know, who is a good Israelite and who is not. This obviously is rule number 47. You don't eat with tax collectors and dogs, and Jesus is doing it. So he's just accusing them. And Jesus's response in 12 and 13 is just phenomenal. And so let's just spend a few minutes on that. So in verse 12, it says, when Jesus heard that, so what's interesting in verse 11, the Pharisees are talking to the disciples, and Jesus either overhears it or just hears it because he's Jesus, right? And because he knows what's going on everywhere. So he responds, even though they weren't talking directly to him. He said to them, those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. So this is the first thing he says. Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. So he's attacking the physicians, even with the physicians. He's attacking the Pharisees, even with this statement. So here you have, again, remember in the Pharisees' mind, there was a connection between physical sickness and sin. So when he talks about the physician and wellness, he's not being unclear to them that he is talking about sin and forgiveness, right? When he talks about a physician and wellness here, he's talking about someone who can forgive sin. So that's very clear to the Pharisees. That would not be something that they would not understand. And so he's saying that if you agree that people are sick or are sinners, then the forgiver should go to them, right? The physician should go to those who are sick. The forgiver should go to those who are sinners. So that's what he's saying to them. If you're saying, why am I here with sinners? Well, if these are sinners and I can forgive sin, then I should definitely go with them. And also cloaked in that statement is, and why aren't you? Right? Why aren't you trying to help them? You're supposed to be the spiritual leaders. You're supposed to be the ones who can help people. Why are you not helping them? Where is your mercy? Where's your mercy to these people who are sinners, these people who are sick and need a savior, need forgiveness, need God? Where's your mercy towards them? And so again, I got to say as a sidebar, do we do the same thing? Do we kind of pull back from sinners? Do we where is our mercy towards the sick / sinners. All right. I'm just stabbing you every once in a while to make sure you're paying attention. All right, let's go to verse 13 because there's more to come. So the second thing he says, but go and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. So the first thing you got to recognize is, but go and learn, that's a slap in the face to them. That's a rebuke, right? These are Pharisees. They shouldn't have to learn anything. They know everything, right? And he's saying, maybe you need to go back to elementary school and learn what this means. Go back to Hosea, which you've said you know and you understand. And this is a quote from Hosea 6:6. And make sure you understand what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. Because he's essentially saying, if your heart is right, then you would be doing something about this. If you had mercy, you would not be so worried about your rituals, about your rules. He said, I'm not worried about rituals and rules. I'm worried about mercy. I'm worried about healing these people and healing them of their sin, right? I'm worried about reaching them for God. You're worried about the ritual. You're worried about the things you've always done. And, this takes us all the way back, right, to blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy, or they shall have mercy, right? He's teaching them the very same thing here. So again, the little stab in the heart is, do we as Christians get tied up in our routines, but our hearts are far from God? The mercy's not there. We're all about doing let's make sure we get to Sunday school on time. Let's make sure we attend church. I'll even read the Bible once a day. But is that just a routine? Is that God's not worried about routine? He's worried about our hearts. He's worried about mercy. Are we expressing mercy? Are we inviting the sinners in for a feast? Right? Do we care about those who need forgiveness? Let's keep going, verse 13. And again, this great summary verse then at the end. For I did not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance. The Pharisees believed they were righteous, right? We've seen this over and over again. And he had nothing to say to them. He came to save sinners. He didn't come to save people who were self-righteous. I do want to go to Luke. Turn there for a minute to Luke chapter 15. There's this amazing section in Scripture that maybe at some other time we'll go through, but amazing in the Luke. I'm looking at the wrong book. Luke chapter 15. Luke chapter 15, look at verse 1. We'll start there and then pop. Verse 1, it says, then all the tax collectors and sinners drew near to him to hear him. First of all, that statement, right? All the tax collectors and sinners drew near to him to hear him. Those are the ones who came. And then in verse 2, again, the Pharisees and scribes complained, this man receives sinners and eats with them, right? So we got a very similar statement that's going on. And then what follows this? Jesus tells three stories. The first one he tells is the lost sheep, right? In verses 3 through 7. Look at verse 7. Look at the end of it. It says, I say to you that likewise there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 just persons who need no repentance. In other words, 99 people who think they are just, right? That the joy is going to be over that sinner, the one who repents. Then he has the parable of the lost coin in 8 through 10, and then look at verse 10 again. Likewise, I say to you, there is joy in the presence of angels of God over the one sinner who repents, not the 9 coins that don't, right? And then he tells us the parable of the lost son, the prodigal son, that we know very well, right? And you remember the story. You remember the son goes out, he gets into trouble. He finally returns to his father. The father gives him this great feast at the end, And you remember the response of the older brother, right? Who is a picture of the Pharisees. Oh, wait a minute, what about us? We've been doing all the right stuff. We've been doing all the good stuff, right? But his heart wasn't there, right? He wasn't real. And look at all the way at the end in chapter 16, verse 13, right? No servant can serve two masters. He will hate the one, love the other. He'll be loyal to one, despise the other. He cannot serve money, God, and mammon. That's not the verse I wanted to read, but it's a good verse. Where is the verse I wanted to read? I didn't write it down.
Is it 18? Chapter 18?
No, I don't know. What was I don't know what I was doing. So I'm in chapter 15. Why did I say 16? The last verse in 15 is what I wanted you to see. It was right that we should make merry and be glad, for your brother was dead and is alive again, and was lost and is now found. Right? So again, his response is, this was a sinner. This was someone who was lost. This was someone who recognized that they were a sinner and came to me. So all I'm trying to say there is this is the pattern that Jesus has over and over again. And then flip over to chapter 18 in Luke, to a place we keep going because it's such a great example. The Pharisee and the tax collector, right? In chapter 18, verse 9, it says, and he spoke this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and despised others. Two men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. Again, this is the great dichotomy between those who are self-righteous, the Pharisees, and the tax collector, who everyone understood was a sinner, right? And again, in verse 14 at the end there, I tell you that this man went down to his house justified rather than the other, for everyone who exalts himself will be humbled. He who humbles himself will be exalted. So this is the same message. We're going back to Matthew now, but this is the same message that we have in this, in this story between the tax collector, who is a sinner, who knows he's a sinner, who Jesus asked to follow him, and the Pharisees, who believed that they were righteous, believed that everything was okay, but Jesus says, I'm not here for you. All right.
Rich has
Yeah.
a question.
Yep.
So all this starts with the conversion of Levi/Matthew, and he goes and has his banquet. Are all these parables at the same banquet? I mean, it sounds like, is it different times, or is this all happening at that time? I mean, there's a lot of parables, but it doesn't seem to separate as to like a timeline. You think there's
So
going on?
you're asking a good question that the commentaries like to talk about, and that is, because in some of the other gospels, these are not in the same order, right? So what is the correct order? And the answer to that question is, Matthew is trying to tell a story. He's trying to convince you that this is God, that this is God is deity, and in doing so, he is using examples that he has seen where Jesus has done things, and in order to tell that story. Now, are they in the correct chronological order? I don't know. And honestly, there's no commentary that has a good answer to that question. I believe that Matthew is trying to tell the story and is using these examples from whenever they happened. Now, it's not illogical that they did happen in this order. Okay, so it's not illogical, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to, bet my whole life savings that this is the correct order, because again, the commentaries are all over on this. But it's not illogical that these are in the correct order, and certainly, that Matthew, that his salvation occurred right here, after the healing of the paralytic, that they had this feast, that Jesus then told these stories right after it is a very logical sequence, is the best that I can tell you. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, that's fine. And the only other comment I had was, when you were trying to find the verse, I figured you said in chapter 16, I was going to tell you 14 and 15, because the end of 15 talks about God knows your hearts. So I figured that's where you were leading us, but you didn't go any further with that, so.
That's a good one too. Thank you. All right, now, so having said all of this, right, so again, we've looked at, here's a positive example of a sinner who has turned, and now we see the negative examples. Then there's something else that he adds here in verses 14 through 17. So let's take a look at that. It says, then the disciples of John came to him. So the disciples of John, this is John the Baptist. At this point in time, John may or may not be in prison at this point in time, and again, depending on the chronology that we're looking at. But these are John the Baptist's disciples. You remember that John actually tried to tell his disciples to go and follow Jesus, but there were some who still hung around with John and followed him, and we see them even later on in Scripture where there were still some disciples of John who played a part. But here we have them, they came to him and say, you know, why do we and the Pharisees fast often, but your disciples do not fast? So that tells you that John's disciples were putting themselves in the same characteristical, the same bed, if you will, as the Pharisees, and saying that we are, we think we're doing it right because we are fasting. If you remember the story of the that we looked at in Luke chapter 18 of the Pharisee and the publican, right? One of the things that the Pharisee says, hey, I fast twice a week. Right? And this guy is, he's a tax collector. Well, if you remember when we talked about fasting back earlier in Matthew, there's only actually one time a year that God requires us to fast. But the Pharisees, they went way above that, and they were fasting twice a week. And again, this was part of the rules that they invented, that people had to fast twice a week. So they're again coming up with human things, human requirements, and they're saying, well, Jesus, why are you not following these requirements of the Pharisees to fast twice a week? You guys are not fasting. What's going on here? So they're accusing Jesus of not being religious, not following the rules, if you will, by not fasting. Now, I mean, they're really kind of saying to him, why are you, in the best light, they're saying, why are you so different? Why is your practice of religion so different from the Pharisees? We don't get it. We don't understand. So again, we need to look at Jesus's response and try to understand what he's trying to say here. So in verse 15, he says, can the friends of the bridegroom mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them? But the days will come when the bridegroom will be taken away from them, and then they will fast. So he's essentially saying, wait a minute, this is essentially a wedding. This is essentially, these are the bridegrooms being the disciples, right? And him being the bride of Christ. And so he's saying, we're at a wedding. Why should we be fasting? So let me ask this question to you. What is fasting about? This is a quiz to figure out if you remember anything from the lesson we had on fasting a couple of months ago. So what's the purpose of fasting? What's fasting about? Anybody remember?
Repentance, focusing on your sin and focusing on Jesus and ignoring your physical, because you're so focused on your sin, or so mourning over your sin that becomes more important than eating.
Yeah, exactly. So in Scripture, when fasting is talked about, we covered, I went and looked at many examples of this when we looked at this section on fasting. All in Scripture, when it talks about fasting, it's all about mourning. It's all about prayer and fasting. It's all about sorrow. It's all about a broken heart. It's all about your sin and understanding, blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted, right? It's that stuff. That's what fasting is about. Fasting is not about getting something from God. Sometimes we think about fasting. If I just fast, I'll show God how serious I am, and then we'll have a breakthrough, right? That's not what, or even better, if I fast, I'll lose 20 pounds and then, God will be more happy. Fasting is not about getting something from God. Fasting is about recognizing your own sinfulness and your own brokenness, and it's about sorrow, etc. So I will just say this because of context. We're going into 21 days of prayer. Some people say 21 days of prayer and fasting, right? I think the pastors even said, hey, this is a good time to think about fasting from something. I think that's a perfectly fine thing, but just recognize that's not the same as the fasting that is being talked about here. Okay, it's perfectly fine for you to give up something in order to gain something, right? To give up something so that you can spend more time with God. That's a perfectly good discipline, but it's not the fasting that's talked about in Scripture. That's all I got to say. The fasting that's talked about in Scripture is always over a broken heart, over something that has happened. People fast after the people, you remember, all the people were killed in the war, then the rest of the people fasted, those kinds of things. So let's get back to the verse then, wherever it is. Verse 15, can the friends of the bridegroom mourn as long as the bridegroom is with him? So what he's saying is that now is not the time for fasting. Now is the time for a wedding. But the days will come when the bridegroom will be taken away from them, and then they will fast. And that, by the way, that word taken away means violently taken away. He's saying there will become a time when I will be violently taken away from them, and then their hearts will break, and then they will have sorrow, and then they will be fasting because they can't do anything else because they're so brokenhearted that I will not be here. So that's really what he's trying to say to them. You are putting this ritual in place around fasting to try to get something from God, to show how important you are. That's not what fasting is about. Fasting is about a broken heart. Fasting is about understanding your sin. So again, he's telling them the same story. You people, salvation and forgiveness comes to those who understand their sin, and you people don't understand your sin. You're still wrapped up in this ritual of fasting rather than actually understanding your sin. Make sense? Okay. All right, now let's look at the last piece of it then in verse, whatever is next, verse 16. 16 and 17. No one puts a piece of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, for the patch pulls away from the garment and the tear is made worse. Nor do they put new wine into old wineskins, or else the wineskins break, the wine is spilled, the wineskins are ruined, but they put new wine into new wineskins, and both are preserved. I don't know. Do I need to go through why does this happen, right? You put when you put new wineskin or a patch on something, the old will fray out, and then the patch will actually rip a bigger hole. The same thing with the wineskin. When they used the wine, it was usually an animal skin, and after they used it once, then the skin would dry out, and they could not use it again for wine. So he's saying that this old cloth or this old wineskin is not able to contain the new wine, is not able to contain the new garment. So essentially what the message he's trying to say to them is, this message that I'm teaching you, this idea of forgiveness does not fit into your structure, into your ritual-based religion, into your pharisaicism, if you want to. I just made up a word. It doesn't fit in that. You can't use it. You can't just take all of the ritual that you have and just add on the teachings that I have made, and everything will be okay. You actually have to throw away the old wineskin. You got to throw away the old cloth, because this is something completely new. Now, that's not to say that you throw away the Old Testament. That's not what it's saying. What he is saying is, I need you to throw away this religion that you have made up. this Pharisaical religion, all of these rules and regulations and things that you've made up, that's the piece that goes away. No, the Old Testament is good. I've already talked about that. I've already showed you, this is what they said and this is what they meant. But this religion that you have put in place, this stuff is not, you cannot connect that. You got to throw that away. And this is what really made the Pharisees angry, right? Is essentially he was saying that all the stuff that they had come up with, all the work that they've done, all the things they've written down, all the things that they're holding people accountable for, all that stuff needs to go away because we've got new wine, we've got new cloth, and that is the only stuff that's valuable. Your ritualistic, self-righteous system will not hold this truth. Make sense? Or not? Make sense or not? Really, ask questions if it's not, because this little perspective is important.
Makes sense to me.
Well, it seems too, without the rules and regulations, the Pharisees are out of a job. They're no longer useful. They have no purpose at all.
And no importance either.
No, because you totally take away their livelihood.
Yeah. Again, Christ's system says, I am a sinner. The Pharisee system say, I'm righteous. I'm not a sinner, right? So the two things cannot be brought together. All right, good. So let me just summarize all of this with a couple of statements, and that is, how do you know if you're a true believer? Number one, we look at Matthew. You follow the Lord. It may be simple, but following Christ, and that means obedience, right? A true believer follows Christ. Secondly, a true believer feeds the lost, right? Matthew called his friends in. A true believer has mercy on the lost. And see, this is the difference between what I've called before the social gospel and the real gospel, right? The social gospel says, hey, if there are people who are hurting and poor, you need to go out and feed them. You need to go out and help them. The real gospel says if there are people that are hurting and in need, you need to make sure they know Christ. And you need to feed them and you need to help them. Right? It doesn't separate those things because you have mercy on the biggest problem that they have, which is their separation from God. And then thirdly, or fourthly, wherever I am, a true believer forsakes legalism, ritualism, the bondage of the world, right? Forsakes that because he knows that's not compatible. The two things can't go together. Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Rich, I had a comment based, way back in the beginning, we were talking about, Matthew just getting up and following Christ. And, one of the things I read one time is I guess back then the rabbis were kind of the rock stars, running around. And so you went to synagogue school until you're about 12, and then you started a trade, but if you're really somebody, you started following one of the rabbis. So this, in this case, Jesus was kind of Jesus was a rock star. Here's a rabbi, in one sense, coming around and saying, hey, follow me. And so Matthew is able to just jump right,
Yeah.
Just the excitement. I think the thing is I just miss the excitement that they had about, I kind of look at it like, I'm in my cubicle and Bill Gates comes up and says, hey, I want you to go work for me. And I'd be like, whoa, yeah, okay. Well, I probably wouldn't, but, but it's that excitement that he probably had, we don't necessarily feel that, sometimes in the words, but that's just a lesson that hits me hard is, am I really excited? Christ is a rock star. He's, it's awesome. And I sometimes lose that excitement.
And I think, and I just want to, the other thing I just want to make sure you get is that Matthew would be thinking there's no way that he would ask me. right? I'm the worst of the bottom of the feeders of the dogs of the, right? And I'm afraid some of us don't think that view. We think, well, obviously Jesus is going to pick me. I'm one of the good people. He's going to slay. That wasn't Matthew's idea. He was shocked when Jesus asked him to follow the rock star. Yeah. Any other thoughts? It's good. All right, I did want to stop a little early, so I'm glad we did. Just because I think prayer time is important right now in the midst of all this going on. I know we have a list of stuff to be praying for.
First.
Huh?
I'll add in, but you do it.
You want me to say our prayer list? All right, so we have several prayer list stuff.
Turn off the recording.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, number one.